Hey guys, it's Stormcrow again. I was asked to repeat some of my last video, this time with a keyboard and mouse overlay, so that's what I have here. That movement arrow is kind of freaking out, but it vaguely shows my mouse controls when there are actual mouse inputs. The rest of the time it's just kind of losing its mind, so sorry about that. I'm still kind of tweaking how that's going to be set up in the future, but that's looking pretty good. So I guess I'll just retread most of what my Vertex bouncing video covered to start with, and then we'll also play with some turrets and some other stuff, assuming the video doesn't stretch out for too long. So starting off, I'm going to climb up this tower, and I'm not going to talk a whole lot, so I can concentrate on just what I'm doing. But you'll be able to tell by the inputs and by the differences in the jetting, say the conventional way, versus the less conventional way, why this can be advantageous. And obviously my main metric is energy usage, not necessarily speed, because it's hard to get up here faster than normal. I just totally missed that one. So it's not like the easiest thing to do, which is kind of why I need to concentrate on doing. That was a pretty decent jump. And sometimes you can get up there with like nearly full energy. It just depends. It just depends on the RNG you have, because it's sort of a balance between the number of bounces, the number of warps you get like those, versus the number of dead stops you get as well. And this works against most nearly vertical surfaces. So obviously it works on that tower, and it also works on this one, although this one is pretty hard to get all the way up without just running into too many dead stops. Like that. So until you're really good with it, or unless you just really need to do it, it's not going to be a very reliable tactic. So I wouldn't recommend, I'm not really calling that a pro tip. That's more like a trick to show some of your friends. So you could barely tell there, but I was able to bounce off that second ledge and sort of get a bit of an upward push. And that's nice if you need to ambush people on this hill here. This is sort of how you would typically ski, where you're hitting the apexes. I mean, trying to. I'm a terrible skier, if I'm being honest. But I mostly want to juxtapose that with the Vertex bouncing that I'm intending to demonstrate here on the next run. I'll ski more traditionally over to that tower, and then I'll try to come back and show you maybe what Vertex jumping can do for you instead. So this is what I would consider a fairly typical route down there, and again, I'm not a good skier. I can't hit these things reliably, but you're looking at like 180 up in the 170s or something like that. So what I'm going to do this time is, instead of trying to ski down the hill, I'm going to come all the way down to where these two vertices meet. I'm going to try to find kind of a sharp V in there, and then I'm going to bounce off of that in what I would call a vertex bounce, or a vertex ski is what I'm taking to calling it. So there's a bit of a vertex there, and we're up to 184, 200 range. So it's not much of a boost, but if it's a hard piece of terrain to ski, like that hill can be, it can get you an extra little bit. And then the route that I was running last time, I'm going to bounce off of this vertex, and you can see by the targeting laser where the difference in those terrains are. So again, that's sort of creating this V, and if you bounce on this part of it and then immediately bounce there, your cylindrical hitbox with a flat bottom will sort of ski that difference, and it'll sort of bounce you off, sort of like a check mark. So I'm going to hit that part, and then I'm also going to hit this divot right here. Now, this is kind of a weird divot, right? Like you wouldn't think of this as a good skiing opportunity, but I'll show you how it's actually a really great way to get a boost up and over that hill, particularly in like heavy offense or if you're deploying sensors or turrets or something like that. So we're going to try to land just before that. I kind of missed it. I was a bit late, and so I wound up more cratering than bouncing, but that one you could tell I got a kind of interesting speed boost, and you could hear the ski sound effect rather than the footfall sound effect. And then same thing there. I'm maintaining an awful lot of speed even though I'm hitting less than ideal terrain. And that's really what this technique is designed for. This is not going to replace good skiing. This is just sort of bailing you out when you make a mistake. Or if you're chasing after a capper, you DJ in a weird direction. This is sort of a way to salvage an interception as opposed to just costing yourself that successful chase outright. Now, with the turrets, what I want to play with is something that I call an activation pause. Missile turrets, AA turrets, they only fire under select conditions, but plasma turrets will fire anytime they detect you in range. So I'm going to walk over to this plasma turret, and you'll see that it starts shooting nearly immediately, as long as I'm within range of it and of that sensor. Now, there are two different ranges that are relevant for turrets. Number one is the plasma's firing range, which means that under ideal sensors, it's going to fire at me at some distance. I don't know what that distance is, but I'm here 162 meters away. My sensor warning bar in the top right corner is flashing, but I'm not being shot at. But I suspect that as I inch closer, so about 150, that thing starts shooting at me. So that's just something to note. And then if I were, I don't know, I think if I were to kill that sensor, maybe that range would decrease a little bit, but maybe not. I don't really know. But if I'm spotted by an enemy player or by a sensor net, that turret will activate slightly faster or slightly farther away. It'll start the activation process, as I call it. And what I mean by the activation process is that as I close into 150, which is where it'll start shooting at me, so about 149. You see how that turret stood up and looked at me? It sort of stood up, or I'm sorry, as it stood up, and then it has a slight pause, it looks at you, and then it pauses just a tiny millisecond, and then it fires. So I'll show you what the full firing process looks like. But you'll notice that there's that little microsecond there where it pauses both after it stands up and then as it shoots. That pause is critical because all turrets do that. Sentry turrets, spike turrets, spider turrets, and large base turrets all do that. And they'll give you that just tiny bit of warning for you to react. And so with the plasma turret, it fires at a steady cadence, and you can just sit here and dodge this plasma turret using strafing and good timing pretty much indefinitely. And say you're a heavy offense on a hill, or you're a medium, but you've only got 2 missiles instead of enough, say 4 missiles to destroy the turret outright. This is a good way to go ahead and deplete the energy of the plasma turret to weaken it enough so that you can go ahead and get the kill when you otherwise normally wouldn't be able to. And that's because turrets, like all vehicles besides the tank and the bomber, they draw their firing energy from their shield energy. And so depleting one is depleting the other. So I am, in essence, killing this plasma turret, though very slowly, just by letting it shoot at me. And because it's so predictable, there's very little risk to me right now. The only thing I'm really going to be in danger of is drawing the attention of enemy defenses, because this is pretty hard to miss if you're on defense. So somebody's going to come over and kill me to stop my shenanigans. But you can see there that that's a pretty weak shield flash. And that's because the longer this turret fires, the more of its energy it's draining. And we could, if I wanted to, eventually go ahead and kill this turret outright. The dead giveaway of the best time, if you only have like 1 missile or you're limited on disc ammo or something like that, there will be a break in this plasma turret's cadence where it's fully out of energy and it has to recharge for another like half second before it can fire again. Once it breaks that cadence, number one, you have to be careful to avoid that follow-up shot. But number two, you know that you need to start pounding it, because once you do, it's not going to be able to return fire on you. So right there, you could kind of tell there was a bit of a pause on that second shot at me here at close range, and it's because it ran out of energy. And then as soon as it runs out of energy, the shields are depleted and it'll start taking body damage, which you can tell by the damage appearing on the model itself. So that plasma turret has now been disabled. I am not foolish enough to try to repair an enemy plasma turret because I know what it'll do to me. So just to sort of show how this can be valuable, for once I'm carrying flares. I normally don't, but missile turrets will target and track you, and if you're careful with your energy management, you can avoid having these missiles shot at you altogether. And if you're looking, again, next to my sensor warning bar, underneath my blue energy bar, you'll see that red heat bar rising. As it gets to mid-range, that'll start flashing. And as soon as it flashed, did you notice that that missile turret woke up? That's because that flashing denotes the time that you can start to be targeted by AA and missile turrets and handheld missile launchers. So anytime you're flirting with that edge, as soon as you see it start to flash, even if I'm in missile range, I have nothing to worry about, because that turret still has to wake up, look at me, then pause before firing. So as long as I'm aware of my energy drain, I have nothing to fear from this missile turret, even if I'm not carrying flares. Key word there being, if you're careful. So this is a typical chase route for me. Again, just to show you another usage of that Vertex jumping. Instead of skiing that Vertex, I can maintain 200 kph without jetting to adjust my course. And what that means is that whenever I'm cresting this hill here, I've got full energy for a snipe on a flag carrier. So essentially, as I'm coming over this side, that flag carrier is going to be traversing this area right here. That's all wide open ground. And I've got wide open snipe shots on him the entire way. And he's going to be moving not quite in my same vector, but close to it. And so that's actually a fairly easy shot. By this point, he's normally relaxed. He doesn't think he's got any chasers right behind him. And so he's just going to be heading in a straight line. He's not going to be evasive. And he's actually a pretty easy target. So again, I'm just sort of flirting around with his missile turret. And there's really nothing it can do to me because there's that activation pause it has to deal with. So yeah, and like I said, the same thing works with any and all turrets. So the way I was dancing around the plasma turret earlier, you can do the same with spider clamps if you're far enough away, and if you're paying close enough attention. Your terrain's flat so you can strafe as accurately as you need to, because spider clamps have a pretty fast projectile speed. You can easily do it with land spikes because they're comically slow, and they have a fairly short range as well. But it's a really handy tip, and I just recommend you try it out and get used to sort of being able to manipulate tiny variables like that. Yeah, he's chatty, but he's not going to do anything. But just to be on the safe side, I will throw that flare.